Gyanakosha, Puranas, Introduction.
Sargaccha pratisargaccha vamsho manvantaraani cha vamshanucharitanchaiva Puranam panchalakshanam. Sargaccha pratisargaccha vamsho manvantaraani cha vamshanucharitanchaiva Puranam panchalakshanam.
Brahma Purana, Vishwamitra and Indra. Many years ago there was a terrible drought. There was no food to be had. The sage Vishwamitra had come to the banks of the river Gautami, Ganga, with his disciples. Vishwamitra's wife, children and disciples were all hungry. The sage therefore sent his disciples out to look for the food. They searched everywhere but could not find no food. The only object that they could find was the body of a dead dog. They brought this to Vishwamitra. "We have no choice," Vishwamitra told his disciples. "Clean the meat carefully with water. Then offer it to the gods, the sages and the ancestors. This is what we have to live on." Offering the meat of a dog to the gods was unheard of. Indra adopted the form of a hawk and stole the vessel in which the meat was kept. But Vishwamitra got to know about this and got ready to curse Indra. Indra was naturally scared of Vishwamitra's curse. He changed the dog meat into Amrita, a heavenly drink, and brought the vessel back. "I don't want Amrita," Vishwamitra told Indra. "Bring the dog meat back. I don't want to have Amrit when the whole world is starving for food. There is no food available, and I do not see any sin in eating dog meat. Nor should there be a sin in offering it to the gods." Indra was the god of rains. He realized that the only way to persuade Vishwamitra against eating the dog meat was to make it rain so that there could be an end to the drought. Instructed by Indra, the clouds poured down rain. Vishwamitra and his disciples now consented to partake of the Amrita. The place where all this happened has come to be known as Vishwamitra Thirthas. Shweta. There used to be a Brahman named Shweta. He was a friend of the sage Gautama and has a hermitage on the banks of Gautami Ganga. Shweta was also devoted to Shiva. In due course, Shweta died and Yama's messengers arrived to take Shweta to Yama. But they could not even enter Shweta's house. Finding that Yama's messengers are not returning, Yama's companion Chitraka told Yama, "What do you think has happened? When aren't the messengers returning?" Yama now sent his companion Mrityu, literally death, to find out what was going on. Mrityu went to Shweta's house and found Yama's messengers standing outside the house. They explained that they were unable to enter the house because Shiva himself was guarding Shweta's body. One of Shiva's companions asked Mrityu, "What are you doing here? What do you want?" "I have come to take Shweta to Yama," replied Mrityu. "His time on earth is up." Mrityu flung a noose to grasp Shweta's body, but Shiva's companion struck Mrityu with a rod and killed him. When the news of this was taken to Yama, he was furious. With all his companions, he attacked Shweta's house. Nandi, Ganesha, Kartikeya and several of Shiva's companions came to fight on Shiva's side, and a battle royal raged. All the gods arrived to meditate and end the strife. Things had got a bit out of hand, and Yama himself had been killed by Kartikeya. The problem seemed to defy solution. Yama was, after all, performing his duty. But Shiva insisted that his devotees would never be taken to Yama, but would instead go straight to heaven. Shiva's condition was finally agreed to. Nandi brought water from the Gautami Ganga and sprinkled it on Yama and the others who had died in the fighting. They were all immediately brought back to life. Kubera. Kubera was the eldest son of sage Vishwarava. Vishwarava had two wives. The first wife gave birth to Kubera. The second wife was a Rakshasa, demon woman, and gave birth to Ravana, Kumbhakarna and Vibhishana. Kubera used to rule in Lanka and his relations with his cousins were extremely good. But Ravana's mother did not like the idea of her sons mixing so much with Kubera. She called her sons and said, "What are you up to? Why do you cause me so much of pain? You are demons and Kubera is a god. Is it proper that you should be so friendly with him? The relation between gods and demons is one of enmity. Consider Kubera's pomp and glory. Have you got anything like that to show for yourself? Do something as to improve your own statures." Thus instructed by their mother, Ravana, Kumbhakarna and Vibhishana went off to the forest to perform tapasya. They pleased Brahma with their prayers and desired the boon that they might win over the kingdom of Lanka. Ravana also obtained the boon that he would become very strong. Thus fortified with the boons, the demons attacked Kubera and defeated him. They drove Kubera out of Lanka. Kubera possessed a beautiful Vimana named Pushpak. This was also appropriated by Ravana. Ravana also made it known that whoever gave Kubera refuge would be killed by him. This meant that no one dared give refuge to Kubera. Kubera sought the advice of his grandfather Pulasya. Pulasya told him to go to the banks of Gautami Ganga and pray to Shiva there. Shiva appeared before Kubera and blessed him with the boon that Kubera would become the god of all wealth. Harishchandra is the Ishwaku dynasty. There ruled a king named Harishchandra. Harishchandra had no son. One day, two sages named Narada and Parvata came to visit Harishchandra and told him that he would go to hell if he did not have a son. "How can I obtain a son?" asked Harishchandra. "Go to the banks of the Gautami Ganga," advised the sages. "Pray to the god Varuna there. We are sure that Varuna will grant you a son." Harishchandra pleased Varuna with his prayers and asked for a son. "You will have a son," said Varuna, "but there is a condition attached. You will have to subsequently organize a yajna in my honor, and you will have to sacrifice your son at this yajna. Tell me if this condition is acceptable to you." "Yes, indeed," replied Harishchandra. In due course, Harishchandra had a son who was named Rohita. Varuna came to Harishchandra and asked, "What about the yajna in my honor?" "My son is still too young," replied Harishchandra. "Let him at least attain 10 days of age. Till then the baby is in any case impure and is not fit to be sacrificed." After 10 days, Varuna came again and asked, "What about the yajna in my honor?" "Please let him grow his teeth," replied Harishchandra. "Animals are sacrificed at the yajnas, and no one becomes an animal until he actually has teeth." Varuna waited till the teeth grew and returned when Rohit was 7 years of age. "What about the yajna in my honor?" he asked. "These are only milk teeth," replied Harishchandra. "These do not characterize an animal. Please wait until his proper teeth have grown." Varuna returned when the proper teeth grew and asked, "What about the yajna in my honor?" "He is the son of Kshatriya, the second of the 4 classes, a warrior class," replied Harishchandra. "But his training in the art of fighting has not even begun. He cannot be called a Kshatriya until he knows how to fight. Till that day he is an incomplete man. Do you really want such an incomplete man as a sacrifice? After some years had passed, Rohita became skilled in the art of fighting and was appointed the heir apparent Yuvaraja to the kingdom. He was then 16 years of age. Varuna appeared again and asked, "What about the yajna in my honor?" This time the entire conversation took place in front of the prince, and Rohita intervened before Harishchandra could say anything. "Father," he said, "I have already resolved to perform a yajna in Vishnu's honor. Grant me the permission to complete that first. After that, do what you will." Rohita went off to the forest. Meanwhile, Varuna had enough, and he afflicted Harishchandra with a painful stomach ailment. News of his father's illness was taken to Rohita in the forest. In the forest, Rohita met a sage named Ajigartha. The sage was very poor, and together with his wife and 3 sons was starving. "Will you sell one of your 3 sons to me?" asked Rohita. "The boy is needed for a sacrifice." "I shall not sell my eldest son," said the sage. "My wife will not permit the youngest one to be sold. You can have the one in the middle. His name is Shepa. The prince will be 1,000 cows, and the price will be 1,000 cows, 1,000 golden coins, 1,000 pieces of clothing, and a lot of wealth." Rohita paid the price and brought Shepa home to Harishchandra. "We cannot do this," said Harishchandra. "It is the duty of kings to protect the Brahmins. How can we sacrifice the son of a Brahmin? It is better to die instead. Go and return Sunasnepa to his father." Just then a divine voice was heard from heaven. The voice said, "There is no need for anyone to die. Take Sunasnepa to the banks of the Gautami Ganga and perform the yajna to Varuna there. Gautami Ganga is such a sacred river that no human sacrifices are needed if a yajna is performed there." This is what Harishchandra did not. Varuna was satisfied. As for Sunasrepa, he was adopted by the sage Vishwamitra as a son. Vriddha Gautama. The sage Gautama had a son named Vriddha Gautama. The sage Gautama had a son named Vriddha Gautama. Vriddha Gautama was also a sage, but he was very ugly. Besides, he had no nose, had never had one since he had been born. He was so ashamed of this deformity that he could not bear to join the other children of the sages in studying the Vedas and Shastras under a teacher. But Vriddha Gautama knew some incantations, mantras, which he always chanted. He also worshipped the god Agni. When he grew a bit older, Vriddha Gautama went out to tour the world. He travelled to many places and met many people. Since he was deformed, he never got married. Who want to marry a person so ugly as he? In the course of his travels, Vriddha Gautama arrived at a mountain named Shitagiri. He discovered a beautiful cave in the mountain and thought that this might be a good place to live in. So he entered the cave and was very surprised to find an old woman inside. The old woman had obviously been living inside the cave for many years. Her body was thin and wasted from the rigorous of severe tapasya. Vriddha Gautama was about to touch the feet of such a venerable old woman, but the woman restrained him. "Please don't touch my feet," said the woman. "You are my guru. Does a guru ever bow before his disciple?" Vriddha Gautama was surprised at these words. This was the first time in his life that he had met the old woman. "How can I be your guru?" he asked. "You are much older than me. Besides, I have never learned anything, and you are clearly a respected ascetic. Your words are a complete mystery to me." "Let me tell you my story," said the old woman. "Otherwise you will not understand. There used to be a handsome and brave prince named Rithadwaja. He was the son of King Arishashena. Rithadwaja went on a hunt to the forest and arrived at that very cave. There he happened to meet an Apsara named Sushama. The two fell in love with each other and got married. But eventually Rithadwaja had to return home and Sushama gave birth to a daughter there. Sushama left her daughter in the cave itself and the instruction that she was not to leave the cave. The first man to enter the cave would become her husband. It was this daughter who had now become the old woman. Rithadwaja had reigned for 80,000 years. After that, Rithadwaja's son had reigned for 10,000 years. All this while Sushama's daughter had lived in the cave, that is for 90,000 years altogether. Now you see that you are to be my husband, said the old woman. Is a husband not a guru? What you say is quite impossible, replied Vriddha Gautama. You are much older than me. I am only 1,000 years old and you more than 90,000. How can we marry? I am like a child next to you. If you do not marry me, I will kill myself, said the old woman. But I am ugly, protested Vriddha Gautama. I will promise you this much. If I ever become handsome and learned, I will indeed marry you. I have pleased the goddess Saraswati, who presides over all the learning. Through my tapasya, said the old woman, she will make you learned. I have also pleased the god Varuna, and he will make you handsome. Vriddha Gautama became handsome and learned and married the old woman. They lived happily in the cave. One day various sages came to visit the couple. Amongst them there were sages like Vasistha and Vamadeva. But there were also young sages who are not all that sensible. The younger sages started to laugh at the sight of the young and handsome Vriddha Gautama and his aged wife. Who is this man? They asked the old woman. Is he your son or your grandson? The sages went away, but the couple felt ashamed. They asked the sage Agastya what they might do. Agastya told them to go and bathe in the river Gautami Ganga. The river is so sacred that all one's heart desires are thereby granted. The couple did this and prayed to Vishnu and Shiva. Wonder of wonders, the old woman became young and pretty. The place on the banks of the river where these wonderful things happened is a Thirtha named Vriddha Sangama. Pippalana. Many years ago, there used to be a sage named Dadhichi. His wife was Lopamudra. Dadhichi's hermitage was right next to the holy river. Ganga, Lopamudra's sister, Gabhasthani, also used to live in the hermitage. Such was the sage Dadhichi's powers that Daityas and Danavas dared not set foot inside the hermitage. The gods once fought with the demons and managed to defeat them. After the war was over, they came to pay their respects to Dadhichi. Dadhichi welcomed his guests and wanted to know how they were faring. Thanks to your blessings, we are fine, replied the god. We have just defeated the demons in a war. In fact, we have a slight problem. We no longer need our weapons now that the demons have run away. We don't know of a safe place where we can store all these weapons. We were wondering if we might keep the weapons in your ashrama. This is one of the safest places that can be found. Dadhichi consented to this proposal. The gods felt their weapons in the hermitage and they left and went back to heaven. When Lopamudra heard what Dadhichi had done, she was not at all pleased. You have done something that is not proper, she told her husband. One should never accept responsibility for someone else's property, especially if one is an ascetic and has not material possessions of one's own. Moreover, you have agreed to store the weapons of the gods. Does this not mean that those who are the gods' enemies will look upon you too as an enemy? And what are you going to do if something should happen to the weapons? Will the gods not blame you then? Your points are well taken, said Dadichi. But I had not thought of them, and I have given the gods my word. I can't very well go back on my word now. 100 years passed, the gods did not return to collect their weapons. The weapons began to lose their luster. Dadichi did not know how the energy of the weapons might be preserved. He washed them with holy water, and the energy of the weapons got dissolved in the water. Dadichi then drank up the water. As for the weapons themselves, they faded away once their energy was gone. Finally, the gods came to claim their weapons. Can we have our weapons back? They asked. Our enemies have become powerful again. We need our weapons. That may be, said Dadichi, but the weapons are no longer there. I have swallowed up their energy. Let me tell you what can be done. I will use the powers of meditation to give up my life. Then excellent weapons can be made out of my bones. The gods were reluctant, but there was no other solution. Dadichi died, and the gods requested Vishwakarma to make weapons for them out of Dadichi's bones. Vishwakarma compiled, and the weapon name Vajra that he made was truly remarkable. Lopamudra was away when this incident took place. She returned and found that her husband had died. She was afflicted with sorrow and wished to immolate herself in a fire. But she happened to be pregnant at the time, so that this could not immediately be done. Once the baby was born, she killed herself after having handed over the baby to a pipala, fig tree, for rearing. Since the pipala tree brought up the boy, he came to be known as Pipalada. Chandra was the lord over all trees. The trees asked Chandra for some Amrita for Pipalada, and Chandra obliged. The Amrita gave Pipalada a lot of strength. When Pipalada grew up, he wanted to know who his parents were, and the trees told him the story. Pipalada blamed the gods for his parents' death and decided to seek revenge. The trees brought Pipalada to Chandra. You are still too young, said Chandra. First you must become learned and well versed in the use of weapons. Go to the forest, Dandakaranya. The river Gautami Ganga flows through the forest. Pray to Shiva there, and I am sure that your wishes will be fulfilled. Pipalada pleased Shiva through his prayers. What boon do you desire? Asked Shiva. I want the boon that I may be able to destroy the gods, replied Pipalada. I have a third eye in the middle of my forehead, said Shiva. The day you can see my third eye, your wish will be granted. I have a third eye in the middle of my forehead, said Shiva. The day you can see my third eye, your wish will be granted. Try as he might, Pipalada could not see Shiva's third eye. Pipalada therefore performed even more difficult tapasya for even more years. Eventually he managed to see Shiva's third eye. From Shiva's third eye was born a demon that looked like a mare. What is your desire? Asked the demon of Pipalada. Kill my enemies, the gods, was the reply. The demon immediately attacked Pipalada. What are you doing? Asked Pipalada. Why are you trying to kill me? I asked you to kill the gods. But your body has been created by the gods, replied the demon. I will therefore kill you also. Pipalada ran to Shiva for deliverance. Shiva earmarked a region inside the forest for Pipalada. There the demon was not permitted to enter. Pipalada lived there, protected from the ravages of the demon. Meanwhile, the gods requested Shiva to save them as well. Shiva persuaded Pipalada to control his anger. He convinced Pipalada that nothing was to be gained by killing the gods. That would not bring his parents back. Pippalada agreed, but he wished to see his parents once. Accordingly, Vimana descended from the heaven on which Dadiji and Lopamudra were seated. They blessed Pippalada and asked him to marry and have children. As for the demon, it became a river and merged with the holy Ganga. Nageshwara. There was a city named Pratisthatana. A king named Surasena ruled in that city. Surasena did not have any sons. After a lot of effort, a son was born to him, but the son happened to be a snake. The king and the queen were mortified at this turn of events, but they brought up their son in great secrecy. Not even the king's ministers and priests knew that the prince was a snake. When the prince grew slightly, he began to talk like a human, even though he was a snake. King Surasena arranged for the prince's education. After the snake had become learned in the knowledge of the Vedas, he told his father, "Father, it is time for me to get married. If I do not have a son, I am certain to go to Naraka." King Surasena was very surprised to hear this. "How is that possible?" he asked. "Which princess will consent to marry a snake?" "I don't know," replied the prince, "but I do know that I have to get married. Otherwise I will commit suicide. There are many forms of marriage that are permissible. Perhaps a prince can be kidnapped and married to me." Surasena called his ministers and told them, "My son Nageshwara had now come of age. He has also been made the heir apparent to the kingdom. There is no one equal to him in bravery on earth, in heaven, or in the underworld. I am getting old. Please arrange for Nageshwara to get married. I shall then relinquish my kingdom and retire to the forest." The king did not, of course, tell his ministers that Nageshwara was a snake. Surasena had an aged minister. This minister reported that there was a king named Vijaya who ruled in the eastern part of the country. King Vijaya had 8 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter's name was Bhogavati and she was very beautiful. She would be the right match for Nageshwara. The aged minister was sent as a messenger to Vijaya and the king agreed to the match. There was a custom among Kshatriya that the bride did not always have to be married to the bridegroom in person. She could also be married to the bridegroom's sword or some other weapon. The minister explained to King Vijaya that there were some private reasons which made it impossible for Nageshwara to come in person for the marriage. Bhagavati should be married off to Nageshwara's sword. Vijaya consented to this and the marriage ceremony was performed. The entire retinue then returned to the city of Pratisthana. But what was to be done now that the marriage was over? Nageshwara's mother sent a maid to Bhagavati. The maid was to tell Bhagavati that her husband was actually a snake and then observe her reaction. The maid told Bhagavati, "Your husband is a god, but he has the form of a snake." "That is my good fortune," replied Bhagavati. "Normally women are married to men. I must have performed many good deeds in my earlier life to have been married to a god." Bhagavati was then brought to Nageshwara and at the sight of Bhagavati, Nageshwara remembered his earlier life. He used to be a snake Naga in his earlier life and was a companion of Shiva's. His wife in the earlier life was Bhagavati. There had been an occasion when Shiva had laughed at a joke of Parvati's and Nageshwara had also laughed. This had annoyed Shiva and he had cursed Nageshwara that he should be born on earth as the son of a human, but in the form of a snake. When he went and bathed in Gautami Ganga, the period of the curse would be over. When Nageshwara recounted these incidents to Bhagavati, she also remembered her earlier life. The two went and bathed in the sacred river and Nageshwara obtained a handsome and divine form. Nageshwara ruled after Surasena's death, and when Nageshwara and Bhagavati died, They went back to Kailasa to live with Shiva. On the banks of the Gautami Ganga, Nageshwara and Bhagavati built a temple to Shiva. This is famous Tirtha known as Nagatirtha.